I have a friend, he's probably around 35 years old. He's currently like an engineering manager at Instagram, and he manages, I think, maybe 40 people under him. And he told me that his all in compensation between his cash and his equity is about $800,000 a year. Hey guys, if you like the content on this episode today, I want you to go and click the subscribe button so that you can get all of our future episodes of content anytime they come out. Okay, we release probably 3 of these every single week, full of all types of investment banking recruiting advice, and so I want to make sure that you don't miss any of them. Okay, today I want to talk about a popular question that we get all the time, which is probably something that a lot of you are wondering too, as college students or even master students trying to decide what direction you want to take your career in, which is, should I start my career in investment banking or should I start my career in tech, right? Because tech is also one of the very hot fields nowadays. A lot of people want to go into tech. And, as someone that's worked in both investment banking and private equity and, what's called high finance, as well as Silicon Valley as some of the hottest tech startups out there, I feel uniquely qualified to have an opinion on this. Okay. And so, I thought of talking about this topic because I came across a Reddit thread. It's on the Fat Fire subreddit. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, which is like there are these people out there that subscribe to this notion of, hey, they want to save and invest very aggressively. Like they try to save 50 to 75% of their income, which is very, very hard to do. Like you barely spend money on anything. But they do that so that they can retire a lot earlier, basically by their 30s or 40s. Okay, so this guy came in and asked a question about, hey, what would be better for me to start my career in investment banking and high finance or technology if I want to retire early by my 30s or 40s? And so here's my answer to that. I think that both banking and finance are great jobs, first of all, right? There's no right or wrong answer here. In fact, depending on who you are, you're probably going to be better suited for one versus the other, right? Now, if you're like the engineering type, you're super smart, super technical, super quantitative, but maybe you're not as much of a people's person, you're not super sociable, you're not an extrovert, you might be better as an engineer, right? And as a good engineer nowadays at the right tech company, you can make well into the six figures, right? Easily. And maybe depending on what company you go to, if you become a senior engineer at a good enough company, you can make. I mean, I have a friend. He's probably around 35 years old. He's currently like an engineering manager at Instagram, and he manages, I think, maybe 40 people under him. And he told me that his all-in compensation between his cash and his equity is about $800,000 a year, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Like he's probably in like the top one, if not 0.1% of engineers in terms of his compensation. But I'm saying like that's what's possible, right? But you gotta understand, like Instagram is a part of Facebook, and Facebook is one of the highest paying tech companies out there because they're just a money printing machine, right? So you can make a lot of money in tech, no doubt about it. But you can also make a lot of money in finance, right? And also, not all of us are engineers. Not all of us major in computer science. Not all of us can write code, right? And so, even if you don't do that, you can still work in tech, right? Like I did. And so that's more of the comparison that I want to make today. Because look, if you want to be an engineer, then you should go be an engineer, right? But if you want to be a finance person, or maybe you want to be more not on the engineering side but on the business side of finance, or so on the business side of tech, then where would be the better place to start your career? And I would say, look, I'm biased, right? Having started my career in banking first before moving into technology, I felt like was one of the best decisions I made, because I actually made more money in tech than I did in banking and than I did in private equity. Because when I worked at Square and when I worked at GitHub, the equity that I got in both of those businesses ended up being worth more than seven figures. And I didn't stay at each of those companies for more than a year and a half, right? So within a 3-year period, I had two seven-figure payouts. And that's not including my cash salary, right? That's not including my base salary, my cash compensation. right? So that was way more than whatever money I was making in finance. However, I would have never ever gotten that outcome had I not started my career in banking first and then moved into private equity. And I'll explain to you why. Because I learned how to think like an investor from my time in banking and private equity, right? Especially private equity, because that's what we're doing in private equity is we're investing in businesses. So you have to be an investor. You have to know how investors think. But you can't really get into private equity without starting banking first, right? So that's why it's like, I'm glad I started banking first, and I'm glad I did the private equity thing. But then the reason why that helped me is because when you go to tech, a big portion of your compensation is based on your equity in the business, right? You get a lower base salary than you would in finance, but they make up for that by giving you stock, right? Whether stock options or restricted stock units in the company that you're working for, so that it's to incentivize you where if the company does well, you're gonna benefit from the upside, right? Like as the value of the company increases, the value of your stock increases as well, and that's how you get compensated. Now, over 90% of the tech startups out there actually fail. So if you join a wrong company in tech, your equity is most likely going to end up being worth nothing. Like I have friends that join startups and spend a lot of time there, work for a couple years and put in a lot of work, and then their equity ended up being worth nothing. And then at the end of the day, they were only left with their cash salary, which is much lower than what they would have made had they just stayed in finance, right? I was the opposite side of that. Like when I decided to go work at Square, and also when I decided to work at GitHub, I put my investor's hat on and I specifically sought out these companies because I basically looked at all the companies that were out there. I did a lot of research on them to figure out which ones were undervalued and which one had the best business models and which one I thought the venture capitalists and the private equity firms were going to be most likely to put their money behind. Right? So when I joined Square, their market cap was only around $3 billion. Or not market cap, they were private back then. Their valuation was around $3 billion. Today, their market cap is almost $100 billion. It's more than 30x, right? And so that's why the equity ended up being worth so much, right? And then also, my time at GitHub, when I joined, they were worth $750 million. Then, 3 years later, they got acquired by Microsoft for $7.5 billion. So that was a 10-bagger, right? And then so the equity package that they gave me, was worth 6 figures, but then when it 10x, it ended up being worth 7 figures, right? So the key is you got to not only be able to identify the winners, but you got to identify the winners that are going to be huge winners, right? And to do that, it's the same skill that you need as a professional investor. That's what you're doing as a venture capitalist. That's what you're doing as a private equity investor, right? So if you have that skill set first, then you're going to be able to identify the winners, then you're going to join the right companies, and then you're going to get that payday that everybody always talks about when they talk about tech. But it's like, you got to realize most of the people that work in tech actually don't make that type of money. Okay. Second thing is, even if you know how to identify these businesses, you got to realize that these businesses are typically, the ones that are going to be winners are typically some of the hottest companies in Silicon Valley. They're backed by the hottest VC firms, right? They're doing super well. They're crushing it. And so a lot of other candidates also want to work for them too, right? It's not like everyone can just get a job at Uber or Airbnb or, DoorDash or like whatever the hottest companies are, right? They have the pick of the litter. They can choose who they want to hire. And so like even when I wanted to join Square, like the entire finance and strategy team, which is the team that I joined, every single person on there have former banking and or private equity experience. Like they would not hire anyone that did not have that type of pedigree or caliber onto the team. So if I hadn't started out in banking or PE first, I wouldn't have made the cut, right? And then later when I went to GitHub and I was the first hired by the CFO to help him build out the finance team, I myself, same thing. I only look for people who have previous banking and finance and PE experience as well, because those people are the A players, the highest caliber players. They were going to make my life easier. They were going to add more value to the company, which means my equity is going to do better, right? And so these companies, like you want to pick the best companies, that's part of it. But the best companies have to also want to pick you. That's why having that banking and PE experience on your resume first, it's like that badge of honor. It's going to make you just so much more marketable. This is that exit opportunity that everyone's talking about when they talk about investment banking, right? So that's something that people don't really think about. So if I could start all over again, I would still want to work in tech eventually, but I would definitely still start my career in banking and PE first, just like I did. because I truly believe that that's the best way to go about it. Okay, so hopefully this helps you guys and gives you something to think about. If you guys have any questions about either working in tech or finance, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to help you out. All right, bye. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking for more customized advice that's tailored for your specific situation, then I invite you to book a free strategy session with our team at the link below. We'll talk to you soon.